Good afternoon, everyone. Today I am going to present a case of a child with acute liver failure. Coming to the case, it is a 3-year-old boy presented with fever and cough for 4 days, and loose stools 4 to 5 episodes for 3 days, and increasing drowsiness since 24 hours. History of present illness: fever is high-grade intermittent fever. It is not associated with chills and rigors. No rash, and there is history of loose stools, not associated with blood and mucus, and there is increasing drowsiness for 24 hours at the time of admission, but there is no seizures prior to admission, no vomiting or abdominal pain in the patient, and no skin or mucosal bleeds. Coming to general physical examination, child at the time of admission, he was drowsy, he was dehydrated, no icterus, cyanosis, clubbing or pleural edema, no skin or mucosal bleeds. Vital parameters: pulse rate was 130 per minute, BP 90-50 mm of Hg, respiratory rate 25 per minute, and saturation was maintained between 94 to 96%. Coming to abdominal examination, abdomen was mildly distended, no obvious veins present. Liver was soft, tender, 4 centimeters below right costal margin, and span was 9 centimeters. There was no spleen palpable, shifting dullness present. CNS examination: he was drowsy but arousable. GCS was E3, M6 and V4. Tone and DTR, everything was normal. No focal neurological deficits or involuntary movements. Other systems were normal. Coming to investigations at the time of admission, abnormal values are platelets were mildly decreased, and there is a bit of hypoglycemia. There is urea was 50 milligrams per deciliter, and SGPT, SGOT was elevated. SGPT was more elevated than SGOT, and INR was elevated 2.6. And ultrasound abdomen showed hepatomegaly with normal echo texture and having minimal ascites.
We'll stop here, Kirti, for just a second. Just go back to the previous slide now. Yeah. Just wanted to ask from a pediatric perspective, when you have a child who's just coming to you with about 4 to 5 days of fever, an acute febrile illness, a little bit of feeling a bit drowsy, and we have this kind of an investigative pattern, what would you consider, sir?
I have the privilege of being the only non-expert on this panel. I'm just giving you the point of view of a general pediatrician. Now, when I see a child like this, it's quite obviously a febrile encephalopathy. And the first thing that would strike a person in practice on febrile encephalopathy is infection. So to me, this is a child with a febrile encephalopathy, and one of the things that was rampant last couple of months back was dengue. So to me, dengue is still on top of the list. I'm also looking at other viral infections which would induce a similar course.
Perfect.
The liver enzymes are high, but that has to be figured out in the proper perspective.
Yes, I think dengue is probably very high on the cards given this pattern. Dr. Vidyut, it's just a question. When you see liver enzymes above 1,000, broadly as a pediatric gastroenterologist, what are the differentials you would teach your postgraduates?
So if I have enzymes which are very high, like in thousands, so 3 broad differentials that come to my mind. So one is not particularly related to this case, but otherwise, one is acute hepatitis, infective hepatitis. Second is a drug-induced liver injury. And thirdly, if there is some element of shock or ischemia, so it could be ischemic hepatitis. So 3 things that one must keep in mind.
And what acute viral hepatitis commonly cause this kind of a picture?
So the common ones are the hepatitis A and E in this age group.
And can we get this picture in dengue as well?
Well, the enzymes might not be that high in 3,000 or 3,500, but yes, I've seen till 1,200 in dengue. The enzymes might. I don't know with others.
May I put in? Children with a bad prognosis, especially those who come with a febrile and such a high enzymes, we are very worried about the prognosis, but we do get such high enzymes, and the outcome is not really good in such cases.
I suppose an element of ischemia is also can be present in many children who present with shock with dengue. Yes.
I think all pediatricians would have seen.
That basically would mean, we used to see this last year during the epidemic, and most of the time they are patients who have got liver ischemia. So if you do an LDH on these patients, you will find that the LDH is very high. Very high LDH, when you get such a value in dengue, would tell you that it's an ischemic hepatitis, which, like Sir said, is a pointer to a poor prognosis.
Dr. John, would you say that along with the LDH, I mean, like ischemic, you would tend to have a bit more of SGOT elevation than
Yes.
PT, or?
You will find a higher SGOT than in the other situations.
Okay. Dr. Seema, you wanted to...
Just to go back to the slide,
Okay.
and he said that the child was drowsy but arousable. I mean, for this particular audience, I know it's okay to call it just drowsy and arousable, but why don't we say that there is some grade of HE that we are seeing here in this patient? So this is way that we can really correlate his CNS findings with what you've seen in the next slide. Because he has an INR of 2.6, you know.
Yeah, I suppose he didn't say is this HE maybe because there's an element of hypoglycemia, so he didn't know what... he's not mentioned...
Okay, then we have to think, there are two things there. There is an hypoglycemia, and when you say hypoglycemia, we basically mean we must have corrected and seen if the child become
Yeah,
okay or not.
yeah.
But if he has not become okay even after that, then only you say that, okay, the child was just drowsy and not arousable despite having corrected that. And if it is so, with an INR of 2.6, I think we should go back and then start labeling this patient as HE. And it's important really fulfilling the complete diagnosis or definition of ALF, acute liver failure.
Fantastic. So I think there are quite a few things that have come out from the discussion. One is we know that what are all the causes of enzymes going up above 1000. We know that we need to suspect also a possibility of ischemic hepatitis if it's really this child with diarrhea has come in with something. And there is a suspicion also that this child may be going in for something like an acute liver failure, especially given that this child is drowsy with very deranged liver functions, especially the INR. Question to the panelists: can you have acute liver failure with normal or near normal bilirubin levels?
Yeah, I think, as Sir said, if this case comes up, the first thing that comes to my mind is dengue fever. And I say that because despite seeing so many millions of patients with dengue fever, there's very little literature. And I should confess and tell you that the short time that I spent in Bombay last year, I just collected all the cases of dengue and I've taken back to Bangalore and we're working on it. It's astonishing to see the rise of enzymes in these patients. Levels of 3,000, 4,000, 15,000. In Kokilabin Hospital, I saw 24,000. Many of them true have ischemia, but recently when we looked at our series, and we have been doing, fortunately at St. John's Medical College, we do liver biopsies post-mortem. And to our surprise, we noticed adult patients coming just like this. And we did a post-mortem biopsy, we found florid necrosis. And there's recent evidence coming up in patients with these kinds of viruses to show that it is not necrosis per se that occurs that produces such high rise of enzyme, but it's significant apoptosis that occurs that produces such degree or elevation of enzymes. So I think, yes, dengue fever is a classic example where you have near normal transaminases and such significant rise of near normal bilirubin and such significant rise of transaminases.
Could we have any other causes of an acute liver injury or
Drugs
liver
can
failure?
produce these things.
So what kind of drugs can cause near normal bilirubin levels but still very high enzymes?
Very early in the disease, if you look at it, very early in the disease, 3,000 is a little rare, but very early in the disease, if you look at it, paracetamol can cause, and you'll see in the next talk, that even heparin, when you give heparin and you do a liver test, you'll find that small number of patients have transaminases in 1,000 and 1,500. The bilirubin is normal. Why should heparin produce raised transaminases? But it does produce, and does produce in children as well.
Okay. Go on.
Yeah, add something. Nowadays we don't use aspirin that often, but if this child were on aspirin for any other reason, then raise is definitely a possibility here.
Other history, past history, no major illnesses in the past, not on any long-term medications. Immunization history, he was adequately immunized till 3 years of age, not received hepatitis A vaccine. He is a developmentally normal child. And family history, there is no history of liver diseases and no
Stop
case
here,
of
Kirti.
fever
So,
with...
Go on. So with this, I think we kind of answered that he's not on any long-term medications. There's no major illness in the past. It doesn't suggest a family history as well. So any metabolic liver disorder also seems so far unlikely. And Of course, he's not received the hepatitis A vaccine. I just wanted to ask, because we've had a nice discussion on hepatitis A the last session, can we have anictoric hepatitis with hepatotropic viruses like hepatitis A?
Yes, you can, especially in young children. Generally, the hepatitis behaves just like a normal viral illness, and many times it goes unnoticed. So, and that's one of the reasons why there is a controversy whether actually you need to give vaccines to Indian children, because 95% of children are already infected without the parents even knowing that they had this.
So the point that you're trying to say is hepatitis A can be asymptomatic and sometimes can pass off as
asymptomatic, but it can behave just like any other
viral illness and may not cause actually icterus. So if somebody was symptomatic and got admitted in a with, let's say, with an acute febrile illness with the liver dysfunction becoming encephalopathic, would you consider hepatitis A?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Okay. Okay, just go on. We'll go on with the presentation. We'll.
Can hepatitis present with encephalopathy? That's the question. Can an anictoric or asymptomatic hepatitis come with encephalopathy? Is unlikely.
Do the other pediatric gastroenterologists think that it is a little less likely that hepatitis A would, or?
Yes, definitely it is less likely.
Okay.
And the second thing here is that you have a liver which is enlarged and palpable. Normal acute viral hepatitis, when they start going into ALF, you usually don't expect an enlarged liver. So there are subtle points which make it less likely. I would not say that it is not possible, but less likely.
Okay, so panelists again, I mean, a pediatrician there. What investigations would you request at this point of time from an etiological perspective? Definitely you would work up for dengue, and you can chip in to say what other viral markers you would like to do, what are the tests you would want at this point of time.
From a generalist point of view, I would definitely do a dengue serology to begin with, and of course, tests for hepatitis A, IgM antibody, and probably for B as well. I don't think C in this setup is likely. Certainly these two to begin with. And from the point of view of febrile, of course, the amount of liver dysfunction that is there makes your herpes less likely. So probably I would not think more on those lines. But these three surely to begin with.
Anything else that you would want to?
Let's have a look at what investigations are already done. So can you
want to go back to the previous one? Or?
Yeah, the investigations were done.
Go back to the previous one.
So I think in this, so this is basically etiology-wise, we are not very reaching anywhere.
Yeah.
So I mean, like we said, the three things that are there when you have such a large, high amount of enzymes. So I think viral hepatitis and dengue and all we have think. But in terms of other causes of acute hepatitis like autoimmune hepatitis or Wilson's disease, I would keep them a little unlikely because of the such high enzymes that are there. But having said that, it could very well be an underlying CLD on top of which you have an acute hepatitis. So on the back of my mind, that CLD thing will be there, and we'll see how this thing behaves later on.
The enzymes
so you're getting
are
the point.
Too high, but in our setup with the febrile encephalopathy, malaria is always to be ruled out. That's
sure. Sir. Do we have high enzymes with malaria, Dr. Devarvi?
So the sheer number in which dengue occurs, dengue first followed by hepatitis A. These are the first two investigation, and then I will see.
So we'll ask for dengue and hepatitis A. Go on. So yes, we have a previously well child with no underlying liver disease and acute febrile illness with liver dysfunction. Dr. Seema pointed out you should be labeling it as not just altered sensorium but as hepatic encephalopathy because there is coagulopathy. Go on. So go on. And we have a few, go on with what you had as an initial course of management.
Child has initially had dehydration, which was corrected with fluids. Hypoglycemia is corrected with 10% dextrose. We are given oxygen through mask. There is increased FiO2 requirement, so we changed to Venturi mask 24 hours later. Progressive drowsiness, but was maintaining airway. Parents were counseled for mechanical ventilation, and one dose of vitamin K 5 milligram IV stat was given, and prophylactic antibiotic was started. And further history revealed administration of paracetamol in higher doses from day 2 to day 4 of illness, that is more than 200 milligram per kg per day for 48 hours. In this particular case, they have given 250 milligrams syrup instead of 125 milligrams syrup. We have given we have sent serum paracetamol levels on day 5 of illness.
Go on, no, before. Yeah, okay. So this question is to Dr. Deve Bharvi. He's done a lot of work on drug-induced liver injury. He's going to have a talk. This is just a history that we seem to elicit after a detailed history again with one more visit, because we are confused about what this child is having or what it is. We have a provisional working diagnosis of probable dengue, like what Dr. Prakash pointed out. Just this history that there is a very huge overdose of paracetamol. When we send serum paracetamol level only the next day, how do we interpret the serum paracetamol level? Is this history reasonably enough to consider an element of toxicity due to paracetamol?
I think paracetamol toxicity is quite underreported. And there are some studies to show that even those whom we attribute, those patients whom we attribute to viral hepatitis or unconventional viral hepatitis producing enzymes, elegant studies have shown that when you do the paracetamol levels, both in children as well as in adults, the paracetamol levels as well as paracetamol adducts, as they call it, are elevated. To show that these many patients the parents are not forthcoming with that history, or they have forgotten because they do not know what is being given. But it's clearly underreported that paracetamol toxicity produces problem. It's not just in adults, but also in children. And whilst I was reviewing this, I again found many case reports in pediatric literature suggesting that this is pretty common. It just doesn't get reported.
Vidyut, this person decided to start this child with N-acetylcysteine. We are still awaiting paracetamol levels. You've been involved in also setting up guidelines for acute liver failure. They've been published in Indian Pediatrics. Should we begin N-acetylcysteine or should we wait for serum paracetamol levels?
No, I think when you have the INR which is so high, you should straight away start N-acetylcysteine. I know it has been, they say that it might not work in other forms of acute liver failure, but it is known to occur in paracetamol. It is known to be effective. So I think there is no doubt about that.
For all age groups or for only children above 2 years? Because the study says that it doesn't seem to be having some harmful effect in children under 2 years.
No, you're talking about other causes of acute liver failure rather than. Yeah, that I agree.
You said right, probably not wait.
Okay, so while awaiting it, they have decided to give an N-acetylcysteine, and subsequently we have the serological markers which come after about 2 to 3 days. And this is interestingly, all the viral markers are negative here, and we have a serum paracetamol level of around 65, and this falls well above normal, but toxic levels are considered, I suppose, above 100. But these, there is a cutoff on a normogram. But if you look at the normogram above 24 hours, any level above 35 or 45 is also considered as only a toxic level. Because you expect the serum paracetamol levels to fall after about 24 hours. And we don't have a clue as to how long this child has been receiving paracetamol, and we've just done a level. This is certainly well above levels considered normal for children. Just go on to the next.
On day 4 of illness, bilirubin was 1.4 and SGPT 3440 and INR was 2.6. On day 5 of illness, we started on NAC, and on day 6 of illness, bilirubin was 2.2 and direct was 1.8. SGPT came down to 850. INR was 1.73. And after day 8 of illness, bilirubin came down to 1.2, SGPT 120 and INR 1.23. Patient was given NAC for a total of 72 hours. Supportive care was given and he improved symptomatically.
Dr. Vidyut, how long do you give NAC?
I think for 72 hours, and after that you have to stop, because then it starts having its side effects.
Does everybody who has a paracetamol overdose or a paracetamol toxicity need NAC for 72 hours? Or is there any LFTs that you follow to say that we can stop NAC earlier? And is there any
I'm
other...
not sure. I don't know.
You know, I spent a few days at King's College, and they actually don't stop at 3 days. They continue to give it either till the patient improves or they get an organ.
All they get?
Get a new organ, liver transplant. And I asked the same question to them. I said, look, your books and theory...
No, there are two issues. One is King's College deals with the severest of severe paracetamol toxicities who are awaiting a liver transplant and therefore they go on NAC for as long as they need a new liver. I'm also talking about other people who may not be as sick as this child, who have elevated enzymes and completely normalize their INR within 24 to 48 hours. Can we stop NAC earlier or do we need to still continue 72 hours?
I think if you have a declining enzymes, improving prothrombin time, I think you need to stop it. Or at least switch over to one. This is a child, but we switch, in adults at least we switch to oral.
Okay.
Hi, sorry, can I make a mention? Hi, I'm Dr. Shaista. I've worked at King's for the last 2 years, and we deal with a lot of paracetamol overdose children there, more of the teenagers. Now, what happens there is they follow a protocol where your INR has to come down to normal before you plan to stop NAC. So you monitor the INR on a daily basis, depending on how high it is. Initially, it is twice a day, and then you do it once a day. And once your INR is normalized, you stop NAC, you keep the patient hospitalized for the next 24 hours, repeat an INR. If it continues to be normal, then you can discharge the patient safely.
So how long have you been
Until
giving?
normalization
So what is
of
the
INR?
maximum you've given INR
So
and NAC for these patients?
So there have been children who received it for about 7 days on a maximum. Not more than that. They do normalize by that time. And very few of them ended up having a liver transplant.
Final question to the panelists. Do you still think that this is only paracetamol?
I mean, the history is,
Here
there's
your
a temporal
definition of
profile.
Here your definition of DLI comes in.
That is why you need to rule out all the viruses. But if you have a significant history like this, raised levels, and the profile of the liver function test improving all fits in with the or as I call it, I'll talk in the next talk. Every drug has a every drug has a signature, and this drug has the same exact signature. So it's a different matter that viruses also have the same signature. But if you excluded viruses, then this fits in very well.
I think we need to all start suspecting drugs as a cause of liver injury because in this child it's only the history which tells you. There is nothing else that makes you suspect. We all need to be aware of the recently published ALF guidelines. Please go through Indian Pediatrics and update yourself. N-acetylcysteine is certainly a specific antidote. And there's a word of note that maybe among all the liver failures, maybe the hyperacute liver failure tends to carry a slightly better prognosis. And Dr. Ashish wants to have the...
Just since there was a discussion, the only guidelines that I know of talking about the therapeutic misadventure are the Australasian guidelines, where they say a dose more than 200 milligram per kilogram for day for 1 day, 150 milligram per kilogram for 2 days, or 100 milligram per kilogram for 3 days is strongly associated with hepatic liver failure in children. That's the guidelines.
Thank the panelists, the audience, and Dr. Abba for this.